Most founders, most founders believe running a nonprofit is about programs and fundraising. But the truth is, your ability to tell your story determines whether you get to do either of those things well. Your board and team make mission delivery possible, but your storytelling tools will make your existence visible and understandable. Strong governance through HR and internal storytelling infrastructure are not boring admin. They are the ecosystem that builds trust, relevance, money, and momentum. Welcome to episode 11 of Wednesday Wisdom. I'm your host, Mazi Mutafa, Executive Director and co-founder of Words, Beats, and Life. Today, we're going to break down how nonprofits build boards, teams, culture, and the systems that allow others to see and believe in your work. So your story is understood, amplified, and valued. Why storytelling infrastructure and not marketing? Well, let's begin first by making it clear that storytelling is how communities understand you. If I asked you to tell me a story of something that mattered to you, could you? Could you tell me the story of the brand that you might be wearing, the food you might be eating, the community you might be living in? Could you tell me the story of it? Not just the nuts and bolts of its existence or even how it makes you feel, but how it came to be. This is part of your challenge as a nonprofit leader. It's also important for you to remember that if no one can see your work, they can't join it, support it, or replicate it. I always give credit to Retta Morris, who was the very first person that decided to support the work we were doing because she knew that it was happening, because I had been talking about it. Before I had a website, before I had a social media account, I had a catch-all brochure, a quick 8.5 sheet of paper that told the story of the organization. That one that I had at the very beginning was filled with typos. So I was very fortunate to not have people judge me too harshly about the vision I was trying to build based on the materials I had. Who is the circle you're telling your story to? Is a question that you have to ask yourself. You can't be all things to all people. So knowing who is it that you're trying to talk to, whether those are influencers, policymakers, funders, individuals, parents, communities. Who is your story being told to? And I believe that there's a difference between your story and your vision. Your vision is the thing you hope to create over time with support, effort, and energy. But your story is what you've actually already done. So part of our story is that I am a co-founder of a nonprofit that I started with fellow Terps, University of Maryland students, for various reasons who decided to come together to create this nonprofit. That's part of the story, that it's not one person's vision or one person's effort. It's actually 4 people's vision and 4 people's effort. Who's that important to? People that want to know that they're not just investing in a single individual, but actually investing in a collective vision that was built through time, effort, energy, and rigor by a group. That is actually sometimes important to people. Sometimes people want that dynamic individual founder, and being able to tell the story of that one person becomes really important. Lots of people that run organizations talk about evaluation and data, measuring your impact. Well, let's explore how programs and fundraising succeed when storytelling is embedded intentionally in your staffing model and approach to board governance. Tools like newsletters, magazines, videos, journals, brochures, these are not promotional items. They are institutional memory, credibility, transparency, and accountability. So I mentioned when we first started, all we had was a catch-all brochure because I didn't have a fancy website, which we do now. We began as an organization publishing a peer-reviewed academic journal of hip-hop that didn't look this nice when we started it, but this was the one of 2 programs that we had, publishing a journal and running a Saturday program. That Saturday program, over time, developed a manual for what it is that we would be teaching young people if they agreed to join our program. Having this document added a level of credibility that just our catch-all brochure didn't. It said that we had done the work, that put in the effort, taken the time to think through what are we actually teaching, what are the impacts we expect to have, and how can young people and their families hold us accountable to the things we're working towards. Over time, we also most recently created a magazine dedicated to telling our own story, because for years people would ask, how come you don't tell your story in your journal? And my answer was that our journal is dedicated to the field. It is a place where we publish scholarship, essays, poetry, photography from people all over the world to tell the story of hip hop in an academic context. This magazine, which we started at our 20th anniversary, is dedicated to telling our own story. Here on the cover, our director of poetry, the Black Picasso, Patrick Washington. There's an interview with him about the work that he's done with us, and the publication's filled with interviews with alumni. But we are not the only examples I can point to. One of my favorite organizations that's based in Brooklyn, New York, called BRIC. Every summer they send out a calendar of their schedule for the summer that includes who their sponsors are, when things are happening, etc. We are nowhere near being able to have a publication like this, because if I'm really honest, we are still scheduling artists always as close as 2 weeks out from events that we're doing. So I aspire to be as great as Brick. Shout out to Ja Logic for joining me. I've also got the newsletter of the Humanities DC. This was their brand new magazine and annual report in 2023. And they took it a step further, not only to do the things we're doing around storytelling, but they also were wise enough, brilliant enough, smart enough to select a vendor who could also put in a donation envelope. I was just looking at this a second ago, admiring how brilliant that was, to include an opportunity to support their work in the publication. There's also examples like this one called Color and Purpose, which was a publication that was given to me by one of my teaching artists as an example of a more grassroots organization that she experienced in New York City, who's also producing a publication that it doesn't have to be super duper fancy. It's a reflection of where you are. And so it's okay to be where you are and not to have to pretend that you're further along than you are. One of our nonprofit neighbors, this is, I would call, even though it's 4 pages long, I would kind of call this a one-pager, in that it is just a cover with stories about their programming and how to support it. This is just a legal sheet of paper with great stories about their work. You don't have to have a giant publication like the ones I've showed you that we've graduated to over time. You just being able to document where you are, what you're doing, and knowing who your audience is. Like, again, I go back to the example of Brick. This is a calendar for people who are looking for something to do during the summer, and this is from 2023. I have a 2024. They send it out every year, and I get it through the mail because I subscribe to their listserv. So thinking about what kind of materials you can produce for what audience to encourage what action. Let's talk about building a storytelling ecosystem. If I asked you, maybe for those of you that are watching in the comments, what do you think most nonprofits need to be a part of their storytelling ecosystem? Well, while you think about it, or drop your comments in the chat, I'm going to say I believe every nonprofit needs at least however many of the following 7 things that they can produce. And I should tell you, I don't think that you need all 7 of these things to get started, but I do think having these 7 things as aspirational goals is worth having. So even though it is 2025 and many of us don't look at websites anymore, I would say you need a website. You need a website if you're going to be a company, because you need a place where people who don't know you exist can find you in the world. And not everybody is looking for organizations on social media. Not everybody is looking on YouTube to find you. Many people, especially older people, are still using websites to be able to find people. And your website is your home base. It's kind of the place that you can go that's a catch-all space for people to ideally learn all about your programming and be able to reach out to you. I would suggest everyone needs a newsletter. And that newsletter should be the kind of thing that's recurring. It's a relationship building tool where you're able to tell your story to people who've demonstrated that they're interested in the work that you're doing enough to give you their email address and say, send me more information. My staff and I often go back and forth about how often we should be communicating. I am a person that hates getting lots and lots of newsletters, but my staff continues to encourage me to push us towards doing something closer to bi-weekly. I'm quite content to be a monthly newsletter, so we're not flooding people's inboxes with lots of information. Because it's free, I would also encourage everybody to get social media. You choose which platforms. We are on TikTok, we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, and we are on YouTube, which I think you can say qualifies as social media. Um, Having a plan to promote your visibility is why you would have social media. It's another way to promote your work to strangers who don't know that you exist, who might discover you. But it's also a way for people who do know you exist to keep up with the things that you're doing. I would say that every nonprofit should be working to build an annual report or a magazine. I say magazine or annual report only because the goal would be to try to either turn the magazine into your annual report or to have an annual report and a magazine. We actually have three. We have a video annual report that's done by one of my great friends, Trust Real. That is a video annual report where he wraps what it is we did over the course of the last year. We've also done a publication-based annual report that has just the the sheer numbers in terms of finances, but also in terms of impact. And then we have the magazine, which is really designed to do longer form, narrative based education to our audience. We literally created the magazine for our individual donors because we felt like the newsletter, most of us don't want to read a book on our phone. But being able to have something like this magazine be in your office, on your coffee table, as a thing that is a discussion point when someone walks in and says, "Oh, wow, that looks really cool. What's that?" And you can say that that's Words, Beats, and Life's magazine. It's a nonprofit I support. Becomes a talking point to let people in your life know that you're a philanthropist and you're invested in the community. I also mentioned having a brochure. I think that the place to start for everyone is a one-pager or a brochure because it is compact information. It's the kind of thing that is a step up from a business card. Yes, people do still have business cards, oftentimes that have QR codes that lead you to the storytelling ecosystem you've created. But something as simple as being able to explain how it is that you operate in just one page that's colorful, that is engaging, that becomes a set of talking points for you to engage with someone. Nothing, in my opinion, beats a catch-all brochure. Videos like this, being able to tell your story directly to your audience, whether it's on a platform like YouTube or going on live on Instagram or TikTok, etc. Video is great for emotional connection and proof of life that you are a real thing that's led by real people happening someplace on planet Earth, as opposed to just a website that is being operated by who knows who. Thank you, John. I'm gonna let my staff know that monthly is fine. The last thing is stories told by staff, board, and alumni. Um, that is the product of culture. So sometimes the things you're doing are trying to get basic information out, like what your address is and what your phone number is. Sometimes you're trying to tell the story of the impact of your work or who is a part of your community. So being able to have longer form content allows you to be able to do that, to be able to tell a fuller, richer story of not just the organization and the abstract, but the real people who work on it every single day. I think the key principal takeaways are most nonprofits mistakenly jump to content creation without first building the internal processes and capacities to feed those tools. There's nothing worse than having an account that you don't use very often because people go to that and see you're not using it and then pass judgment on you and your team and your strategy. We are definitely guilty of that for TikTok. We started TikTok before we had a strategy for it, and now we've got a content creation strategy for it, and we're just learning how useful it is to be able to think about who are the storytellers on that platform, who's the audience that's most likely to see it, and how can that be a bridge to communities, again, that don't know that we exist or do know that we exist and are not necessarily following us there. Governance and HR are the engine for your story. What do I mean by that? Your board is a storytelling tool. For those of you who don't know about nonprofits are governed by a board of directors of people, a set of people who are volunteers that are recruited to come and help advance your mission. They are also your storytellers. them being able to be witnesses to your work, be participants in your work, to be able to tell the story of the impact is critical. Your staff is a storytelling tool. How's that? Your staff are the witnesses of the difference that you're making. They are capturers of the stories, they are witnesses of the stories, they are participants in the story. So making sure that you have an infrastructure in place that lets them know that them being able to tell the story of the work they're doing is going to be a part of their job has got to be part of your onboarding process and in their job descriptions. That everyone understands working in your nonprofit does not just mean you're a frontline worker or you're a marketing team member or you're a fundraiser. You are a storyteller. And your culture is a storytelling tool. What is the culture of the place that you're building and the impact you're trying to have on the world? And how do stories allow you to make that understood to people who are not participating in it? So think about this. Your board composition shapes what narratives are possible. So in a previous episode and multiple previous episodes, I spent a lot of time talking about boards, in part because for many years, I was very frustrated with my board and the board governance model, period. Until I found, or really until I got to a place where I could find people who didn't just want to put in sweat equity into the work, but really were able to help raise money, to bring collaborators, to identify potential resources, and to challenge me to be a better executive because they were and are better executives in their own lives. So they could actually be my bosses, they could actually be my guides, and be my partner. So board composition shapes the narratives that are possible. So if you have a board full of parents, the vantage points that parents bring to your program is that of a parent. If there's a young person on your board or an alumni, they have a different perspective. If there are people who are the captains of industry on your board, they're going to look at the work that you're doing from a very different vantage point than those other two groups. So thinking about the ways in which the composition of your board impacts the kind of stories you can tell from a governance level. HR practices shape whether staff can represent the organization well. What does that mean? If staff don't know that part of their responsibility is to be a storyteller, they're not going to spend time developing, capturing, witnessing, writing stories. If they think they're there to just be a worker bee, then worker bees is what you will have. But if they are there to be witnesses, to offer testimony, to be able to lift up stories. One of my favorite stories, one day I was in a staff meeting and DJ RBI was at that point our director of projects and special events. And I brought up the fact that the night before I'd been watching Insecure and I discovered this artist named Kamau, whose music just blew me away. And RBI said, "You mean Kamau from the Academy?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "That's that Kamau?" And the answer was yes, because he had been a witness to Kamau's story, had seen his meteoric rise in the music industry, and could tell me that was a student that came from our program. He was a witness to and able to lift up the story that I, as the person running the organization, I knew Kamau, I was there, but I didn't know how far he had come. But one of his teachers did. He was a storyteller in that moment. Governance determines whether story platforms are resourced or abandoned. So what does that mean? If the things that you invest in are the things that grow. It's like if you plant a seed and never give it any water and just count on the weather, you might grow something. But if you plant a seed and water it and maybe have to provide artificial light or build up some sort of a structure around it so that things don't come and eat it while it's still a seed, the things you invest in grow. The things that you just leave to do what they do will do what they do. So if you're not thinking about the role that your board can play, the role your staff can play, the role your volunteers can play, the role your interns can play, the role that you play as an executive, you get what you get. And the truth is, if you want to get what you plan for, you got to plan for it. This is all tied back to our original theme of talking about building a storytelling ecosystem. An ecosystem, I probably shouldn't take for granted. So an ecosystem is a system that is interdependent. Each thing feeds each other. This whole idea of like, why do we have so many mosquitoes or so few? Maybe because you've got a lot of frogs, or you've got things that are natural predators to mosquitoes. Why do we have so many weeds? Because we don't do X, Y, and Z. So if you're building an ecosystem, you have to think about what's the relationship between the things you're building. What's the relationship between the platforms? And the truth is, the things that make it into our RAP Laureate publication don't make it into our apprentice handbook, don't make it into our journal, don't make it into our magazine, and don't make it into our catch-all brochure. Each of these has a different audience that it's trying to reach. Each of the videos we produce, each of the publications, each of the newsletters is trying to reach a different audience. Just recently, I started talking to my staff about wanting to pivot to start talking about our work as 4 generations work. Work with children, with youth, with adults, and with elders. And one of the things that led me to realize through a collaboration with a Boston-based university is that these tools are not necessarily the tools that we need for that elder community. One, because the print is often too small, and I don't want to assume that just because you're an elder means you're struggling with vision, but like I'm creeping up on elder status myself, and so I do struggle to read some fonts sometimes. So thinking about print face, thinking about where it's available, thinking about what kind of institutions we partner with to be able to get that information out. Those things change as we think about how we want to reach new people. I hope this makes sense. When you're choosing board members, you're not just choosing them for skills, but also for their networks and their narrative reach. When they know a thing, when they experience a thing, who are the people that they will be able to tell that can impact your work? Has to be one of the things you're thinking about. From our inception, we've always had in our board member letter of agreement that board members need to represent us to their friends and family or their colleagues, right? But I'll be honest, I have never actually checked in to see how many people did you talk to this month, this quarter, this year about Words, Beats, and Life that is part of that community, that's part of your community, part of your personal ecosystem. And that has to be a part of the process, is not just asking people to do a thing, but to check in to see if they've done it, if they're struggling, or where they're experiencing success. Job descriptions as invitations to mission storytellers. In every single person's description who works in your company, you have to be detailing what it means to be a storyteller, what it means to be about advancing the mission of your organization by telling its story to people who don't know about it. Onboarding as a part of identity formation. When you bring someone into your community, into your ecosystem, into your organization, they now, part of their onboarding has to be impressing upon them that they now have taken on the responsibility of being a storyteller for the work that you do to the public, but also helping cultivate the stories that your company will tell. Culture as content. So the culture of the place that you are operating helps to generate that content. I'm hoping this makes sense to you. Let's talk about the documentation, or the step-by-step framework for building story tools. So one of the first things that you'll need to do if you're working to create a storytelling ecosystem is first document your origin story. Why you started, who was there, what problem you were trying to solve by your creation. Identify the audience who needs that story. That's board members, donors, volunteers, artists, families, press, partners, students, policymakers. And then what tool are you going to use to be able to reach each of those audiences? So if your audience is donors, that might be newsletters or an annual report. That can come out monthly or yearly. If they're partners, it might be a pitch deck or a brochure, and that can come out as needed, be edited as needed. If it's students or youth, because that's who you serve, that could be social media, that could be video. That probably should come out pretty often, like weekly. If it's policymakers, it could be impact briefs or an annual report that details the impact that you're having. If it's staff, that's onboarding docs and thinking about how you really spend the first 60 days cultivating a deep understanding of who it is that you are as an organization, why it is that you exist, and how it is you operate in the world to make change. I think it's also important to think about how you assign internal ownership of storytelling. So, for example, your board chair could own a set of talking points. That when there's engagement with the media, your board chair could be the person that gets talked to, or your executive that's following a set of talking points to be able to help drive home the whole reason why the media is there. Your executive director or chief executive could own the vision narrative. Where are we going, and how is what we're doing right now preparing us to get there? Your program staff can own student outcomes and stories if what you do is serve young people. Or you could take out the word students and just say clients for whatever group of people that you're serving. Your communication staff, their real job is to format and distribute and determine which channel of communication makes the most sense for the story that you're trying to tell. Building a storytelling content calendar is critical. It's broken down weekly, monthly, quarterly posts tied to mission milestones. So if you're trying to take people on a journey, being able to help them understand where you are and where you're going, and then updating them along the way, it's like GPS. When you're driving, it doesn't just turn on and then tell you once you've arrived. It tells you when you've got to make a left, when you got to make a right, when you missed your turn, when there's a stop sign ahead, that you're taking people on a journey to understand where it is that you're going and thinking about how the tools, the ecosystem, the culture of your business is helping support that deeper understanding, that deeper level of engagement, that deeper investment emotionally, intellectually, financially in the work you're doing. It'll be important to evaluate what's resonating with people, looking at opens, clicks, comments, invitations, donations, speaking opportunities, press hits. All these things are going to be the tools by which you measure the impact, the usefulness of each of the things that you create. We have just recently decided we're going to start selling ads in some of these publications, whether that's underwriting for our journal, our ads in our newsletter, ads on our blog, ads in our magazine from companies that we support and that we want to see their work amplified, and they're invested in helping our work reach more audiences. And it's going to be a revenue generator for us. Even if it's modest revenue, it's more than the no revenue we've gotten for 23 years by just giving these things away. This turns storytelling into governance and HR competency, not just marketing, not just a marketing afterthought. All right. I bet you're wondering to yourself, how do I choose board members who extend my story into networks I cannot reach? So one of the things is first to identify what are the networks that you know of that you can't reach, and then who can you find who is a part of those networks that can help you reach them. A good example, we've had great relationships with school principals. We've had one school principal on our board. She was a school principal for a charter school. She helped us think about how it is we might be a resource to the charter school community in a way that was different than we had previously thought. That also, because she was already in that role, that meant she had a network of school principals in the charter school community, but also in the public school community, who she could amplify our work to. We've had people who work in HR at major companies based in our city, and those folks are crystal clear on who in their company should be the people that we should be talking to work to amplify our collaboration and partnership. So thinking about what are the networks you want to be in, what are the kinds of people that are already in those networks, and then how do you reach those people to join your board, either as a volunteer member of your board, as like on a committee, or to be an elected member of your board who pays dues, makes an annual contribution, and helps raise money. Both kinds of people are super useful, whether it's a person that's going to put in the sweat equity to help you advance your mission, or they're going to put in the fundraising, the elbow grease equity that's going to help literally impact your bottom line. I bet you're also wondering how to set expectations that board members amplify and advocate for your mission publicly. Well, one of the easiest things to do, and this was actually an idea of one of our current board members, she asked that we make it mandatory that everyone who's on the board update their LinkedIn profile to say that they're a member of the board, number one. And number two, she asked us to ask every board member to put into the signature of their emails that they're a member of our board of directors. Both of those two things meant that passively, anyone who followed them on LinkedIn would be able to see that they were connected to us as an organization, but also anyone who got an email from them would also see that. I bet you're also wondering, how do I incorporate my staff, interns, or volunteers in their position descriptions across roles into supporting narrative intelligence? Well, one of the easiest things would be to create a survey, asking people at a cadence that you would decide if there's a story about the impact of your work that they want to share, that they feel like other people in the organization should know and outside of the organization. One of the things that our youth development specialists do is regularly update each other with photos and videos of the impact our programming is having in schools, so that they're able to see how their peers at other locations are actually being a witness to the impact of our program. We take some of those stories and then elevate the students that are being profiled to being students of the week or students of the month that are featured on our website or in our parent newsletter. Each of these things is an opportunity for a staff member to help tell a story that only they are a witness to in terms of the organizational structure. The students themselves, of course, are a witness, or the clients themselves are a witness. They can also be asked to give feedback or insight. But the idea is to be able to enlist your staff in being able to do this important work of lifting up the stories of the impact. I'm super proud of the current issue of the EQ that we're literally right now copy editing. Features two stories, again, one with Kamau being interviewed and another with an amazing alumni named Jamila Okubo. And being able to learn about what it is they've done as professionals out in the world, that had I not gotten a chance to interview Jamila and had Substantial not gotten a chance to interview Kamau, there are many things that they shared with us that we wouldn't have known unless they told us. So having alumni or clients or young people be able to tell their own stories and be able to lift those up is another really important thing to do, that you don't need a publication to do. You could have a blog, or you could have a video. There are lots of things that don't take a lot of money to be able to lift up those stories. I bet this is probably the last thing you're wondering. How can I make this part of the onboarding of new team members as storytellers, not just volunteers, interns, or employees? Well, I think that I said it a little bit earlier, but knowing that this is going to be one of the things that you expect of them is important. Important enough to write it in a position description, either as a volunteer, as a board member, as a staffer, that being able to lift up the stories of the impact is going to be your responsibility. Person who've just hired to join my ecosystem is critical. But I also want to say to you as the executive, it is also your responsibility to think about how to incorporate this additional labor, and at the same time, keeping the wellness of your team centered by creating a reasonable workload as a prerequisite for creativity and quality storytelling. Meaning, you can't just keep piling on to people. So if being a storyteller is a new aspect of work you want people to do, is there an old aspect of the work you're willing to go without, or to have be someone else's responsibility who's not expected to be a storyteller? This is something for you to really think about, because it's important for thinking about the culture of the organization that you want to build, and how the story that people tell who used to work where you work, what they have to say as well. That's part of that story that happens in the world. And if you were a terrible boss that always gave people more stuff to do than they had time to do, they go tell that story. Trust me, I know. I know. I've gotten better over time. But recognizing that there's real value in knowing that the difference that you can make in the lives of the young people or the clients that you serve is critical. All right, we're getting to the point where we start to wrap this up. I want to encourage each of you to have a set of practical tools and homework. I want to assign you a project to do over the next 7 days to build a storytelling infrastructure. One, I want you to write your origin paragraph. How did you begin the work that you're doing? Two, I want you to make a list of who your audiences are. I would encourage you to think, You can think about big audiences, a large number, if that's helpful to you, knowing you don't have to reach all those audiences right now, but being able to at least think about who are the people that would care about the work you're doing if they knew that it existed, and who are the people that already care about it because they do know that it exists. So building that list of who your audiences are. I want you to map which existing tools speak to those audiences. I did it earlier when I talked about who the newsletter was for, who the magazine was for, who the annual report was for. So who are each of the tools that I suggested, who are they for you? Identify what tools are missing from your own storytelling ecosystem. So you can build a list and say that, maybe you don't have a newsletter. Maybe you don't have a magazine. Maybe you don't have a website. But being able to identify what's missing from your storytelling ecosystem and how, if at all, you plan to build those things. I want you to update one job description to include storytelling responsibilities. You don't need to roll this out with every single person that you work with. Just do it for one to get started. And then maybe get feedback from the person whose job description you're looking to revise. Maybe it's your job description. Maybe you don't have storytelling as a part of your responsibilities officially as written in your job description. And then I want you to draft one new storytelling tool. That could be a welcome letter in the form of a newsletter. That could be a brochure paragraph. That could be a social post. That could be an intro video. But I want you to take some time over the next 7 days to do each of these things. If you sat down and worked on these 7 things, it would likely take you about as long as it's taken you to watch this whole video. This is really important, and it can be really impactful. So I want to encourage you to do those things. Before we wrap, remember, your nonprofit's visibility is not fate, meaning that you have to do the work to make it so people can see, hear, understand, and be invested in you. That building a storytelling ecosystem is infrastructure that you're building. It's infrastructure. It's intentional. And it needs your attention and intention. When systems, people, tools, and culture align around storytelling, your work becomes seen, supported, and more impactful. All right. Don't forget, subscribe, share, and drop your questions or comments, because if you're building something real, your story deserves to be told repeatedly and effectively. Thanks so much for joining me. This is Wednesday Wisdom with Mazi Mutafa. Peace, y'all.